Hi, welcome back to How's Your Book? I'm Cole.
And I'm Marcus.
And today we are going to be doing a tag video, which comes from Hannah's Books. We'll link her channel down below. And it is the Reading Shifts tag, which is kind of some prompts about how our reading patterns and our what we're reading has shifted over time. So Marcus is going to start us off with the first question. What do we got?
So the first question is, how has your reading developed over your lifetime? Do the kind of books that bring you the most pleasure now differ from the books you loved most earlier in your life? If you've seen big changes in your reading since you've matured, what might explain your changing interest?
I'll start. So for me, my reading development is really influenced initially by my mom, who read quite a lot and had a lot of books in our household, especially genre fiction. So science fiction and mystery were her two big genres. When I was young, one of the things that my mom did early on to encourage me to read more was she would help me pick out two books, and if I read those books, I could buy a book of my own choosing, which I think is genius because it's basically having me read books where the reward is more books. So I think it worked out really well. So some of those early choices were really influenced by what she liked. As I got older and was independently picking out books when I was in my teenage years, I really liked genre fiction within YA and Cassandra Clare, or I did like Harry Potter, of course. As I got older, that got a little bit more mature in some ways, but still a little bit immature in other ways. Slightly things that I look back on and are a little bit cringe, which, that's fair. I was a young'un. And then when I was in college, it was very much influenced by what I was reading for assignments and stuff. When Marcus and I started dating, I think that influenced some of my reading tastes as well. For instance, one of the things that I got into, or that I do like, is Brazilian literature, which wouldn't have been part of my life likely if I didn't date a Brazilian person. Since then, especially once I stopped going to college, my reading interest has been very mood-based. So I would say I've started to like a greater range of things, whereas when I was younger, it was very much genre stuff. Eventually, I got more into literature as well. And for nonfiction, it really broadened out quite a lot, where there's a lot of different things that I might have become curious about at some point in college career, and then didn't have a chance to read. So I wanted to broaden those. So what comes to mind for you for your reading development?
Well, I read a decent amount in my early teens. During my sort of mid-teens, I definitely didn't read as much, and at some point in college, I picked up the habit of recreational reading again. As far as changing interests, one thing that comes to mind is I still like Star Wars. I'm a lifelong Star Wars fan. I do like Star Wars still. Now, there is a sense of the steam coming out of Star Wars a little bit, I think it's appropriate or feels okay that maybe I'm, not that I'm completely uninterested in Star Wars now, but that I might be interested in some other kinds of books, some of the classics that we've enjoyed reading, Victorian books, stuff that's more about life questions,
So you're saying Star Wars doesn't ask important questions about life?
It certainly does in its way,
Yeah.
But up to a point, only up to a certain point.
You have to sift through it a little bit.
You have to sift through sort of very, the weight of mythology and such sort of convoluted structures of mythology. The redemption of Darth Vader. How do we make sense of such a thing?
Yeah.
How do you make sense of Anakin Skywalker? It's a very difficult task because it's so convoluted. Because it's such a mess, the story of this character. Do you know what I mean? Analyzed through a moral frame.
Yeah.
So, did we want to do the second question?
Yeah. What's the second question, baby?
The second question is, do you find yourself choosing different kinds of books at different periods of the year? For example, do the seasons affect what you read for pleasure? Similarly, might you read very different kind of books while on vacation?
So, I think for both of us, seasonality isn't a huge factor.
Not huge, no.
For me, the main thing that comes to mind is that sometimes during the winter, I'm more inclined to read mysteries than I am during the summer, if the mystery isn't taking place in the summer. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes if I try to read a book that is very explicitly set during like the hot July months, you know, and I'm reading it in the midst of a snowstorm in January, it doesn't quite hit in the same way. It doesn't guide my reading choices. And then for vacation, I would say, in terms of vacation, the main thing that like shapes what I might read is if Marcus and I are like driving somewhere together, we'll do an audiobook, and then that brings in the question of like, what are we feeling in terms of audiobook? So that's usually a question of like utility, such as like what's the length of the drive.
Well, it's a complicated dance of what will
Yeah.
work for two people at any given point in time, right? It's an art that you hone for two people.
Yeah. And that's not exactly about vacation and like five.
Yeah.
How about you on seasonality, baby?
I also don't think my reading patterns are very affected by seasonality. I have a random observation. For a lot of people, maybe at the beginning of the year, you would be reading like aspirational, sort of goal-oriented stuff. You're like, I want to tackle this goal. Okay, and you may or may not stick with that throughout the year. I don't know. And I also think it's possible that at the end of the year, you'll be choosing sometimes. You might be choosing shorter books to pad up your reading count, at least for some people, that happens. So if you want the most honest reflection of what you like would choose, absent external pressures, look to the middle of the year. The middle of the year is where you're at your most unconstrained for some people. Yeah.
All right, what's number 3? What's our third question, baby?
So our third question is, do specific experiences in your life ever shape what you choose to read? For example, did you read obsessively about child rearing when your kids were little, about gardening as spring is about to begin, about the experience of grief when someone you loved died, etc.?
So for me, the things that come to mind with this disability. So for instance, when I was diagnosed with migraine disorder, that influenced me to read about migraines.
And about disabilities more broadly.
Disabilities more broadly as well. And then I also have I've got a wrist brace on now, but I have a permanent wrist disability impacted me where I am more inclined to read thin books, lightweight books that aren't heavy.
I don't think I have a lot as far as life experiences shaping my reading.
Do you think having like parents who immigrated to the U.S. Shaped your reading at all?
Well, I do like reading about immigration. Yeah, so that's a good point. But when we started dating, that kind of was a rebirth of my recreational reading. So that's a big way that a life experience had a positive effect. Because I thought it was exciting to like learn about the type of stuff you like to read, and it was like fun to like read together, as an activity. So, people listening out there, your partner can help you read more, or you can help your partner read more. Yeah.
Wise words. All right, so our fourth question, what do we got?
4. Have there been any times in your life when circumstances have limited or perhaps changed your reading in some way? Perhaps caretaking responsibilities or a big move that made it hard to find as much time to read as you'd like, or personal illness that made it harder to concentrate, or maybe just long-term travel that might have limited your book choices. How do you deal with those circumstances?
So for me, one of my answers is going to be very similar. So with my wrist disability, I would say that really changed how I think about books, especially physical books. There are some chunky physical, especially nonfiction books that I have that I don't think I would have bought after my wrist injury, where like I'm aware if I'm gonna want to read that book, I'm gonna need like a pillow to support the book, and I'm gonna need to be very careful and stuff like that. And so that's one where the physical limitation has changed how I would approach it. The other thing that comes to mind is an external situation that caused like limitation or an effect on how I read was recent periods of like intense political strife come to mind. So for instance, when Trump was elected the first time, like that impacts like what you're going to want to read. And there's like a lot of nonfiction literature that comes around these periods that's really prurient?
Is that the word?
I don't know. Relevant.
Are you talking? Do you mean to say prescient?
Prescient. Prescient. Thank you. Right?
Is prurient like when you're prudish? We'll have to look it up later.
Or prudent. Yeah.
So editing Cole here, just to acknowledge that we were completely
off base on the definition of prurient. Oopsie.
I think
I don't
it's
know.
prudish.
But
We'll
what
look it
am
up.
I looking for?
I think you wanted prescient.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the one. But then, like, it's also like the thing that you're dealing with in real life, and so you're like, yeah, it's about time, but maybe not. So that's the main thing that comes to mind. How about you, baby? For number 4.
I used to live in Brazil. It is easier to be a reader, say in the U.S., because the U.S. public library system is a great thing to have access to, and in Brazil, that's a resource that is not as developed. Got very excited also when I think around when we started dating, I started going to the library, and I was like, you can take out more than one book at a time.
Yeah.
That was surprising to me. Yeah, you mentioned political events, political circumstances. Yeah, so I have read a decent amount of Star Wars books. I like Star Wars books, but when you're picking out what Star Wars books are you interested or not, you might be interested in different aspects of Star Wars lore, or like an idiot, you're trying to figure out if any books are like important to the wider lore of Star Wars. Whatever that means. You may look at one and be like, oh yeah, I don't think that one would really give me like tons that I'm interested in. Remember after the 2016 election, sad, and wound up listening to a Star Wars book that I probably otherwise would have been like, yeah, that's too much fluff,
Too fluff.
I listened to Scoundrels by Timothy Zahn, where Han Solo and buddies just plan a heist. It's not really a plot description with a lot of sort of in-universe wider ramifications.
It's not about the
or
Empire.
implications. Yeah. I do remember, I think in that book, there's one member of the crew who's like, kind of the mysterious quiet one. And then at the end of the book, Timmy Zahn's like, and that quiet guy, secretly Boba Fett.
Yeah. All right. Number 5.
BookTube is full of discussions of reading slumps, when dedicated readers seem to lose interest for a while in books. Sometimes they just can't find a book that appeals to them. Have you ever experienced a slump? If so, how did you handle it? If not, do you have any advice to give to people who are experiencing slumps? It's if you've never experienced a slump, give advice to the people who do suffer from this condition. What's your theoretical insight into this?
What do you have to say?
Yeah.
Do you want to go first for this one?
Sure. I'd say I have lots of reading slumps. Sometimes it's like, there's some other piece of media that's competing for your attention.
Maybe really
I'm not always like super into a video game at a given point of time, but sometimes I'll get more into it. Yeah. And that will draw me away from books. Advice for when you're experiencing a reading slump. I would say try to find a category of book you think with a reliable degree of confidence could help be slump breakers for you. A group of books that you've identified as particularly readable for you. Don't read through all of them at once. You have to save some of them like a
little hoard.
Yeah, like a squirrel saves acorns.
Yeah.
But for example,
chickadee saves seeds.
Exactly.
Know where they are. Put them all over the place.
Yeah.
Just hide them in parts of your neighborhood.
Yeah.
And then you go and find them later.
Yeah. For me, some slump breakers have been the books of Christopher Buckley, who writes like light, breezy, kind of silly political satires. He's probably most famous for Thank You for Smoking, which, they had the movie of that. Yeah, like if I'm in a slump, I think like a Buckley book pretty reliably is very easy for me to read. Previously had luck also with, for me, because of course everyone has different slump breakers. It's going to be subjective.
Yeah.
But I remember I thought also good slump breakers were the Ender's Shadow series by Orson Scott Card, the Ender's Game sort of spin-off-y sequels are very fun, kind of YA adjacent, or YA before the term existed. Sci-fi books with a lot of sort of, there are sections in each of them. There's sort of where the author goes into like risk mode and is describing like the troop movements in each country. And so if you're into that kind of thing, that's for me it was a good slump breaker, but everyone's going to have different ones. You should find out what the ones are for you and then don't read them all at once. Save them strategically.
For me, I have reading slumps like fairly often, such that I try to think about it in terms of like over the course of the year, I'm going to have periods where I'm going to be really into reading and then periods where it like really slows down. And the main thing for me that helps is, well, first, like it's not a problem if you say it's not a problem. It will pass, and it's okay to have a break with reading. So I think that helps a lot for me, like to sort of trust myself and sort of think about like, okay, what do I actually need right now? And then there's a couple categories that really work very well. So a big one is Kindle Unlimited. So basically like real light fluff. So sometimes you'll find something where it is a light, easy romance and you actually do like the writing and you think it's well written and it's a good story. And that's very nice and exciting, but sometimes it will also get you cranky at badly written stuff, which like in some ways I find that can get me more engaged as a reader. So realizing like, oh, this isn't what I want right now. I feel like that's a weird answer.
Are you saying it's sort of you're sort of motivated by your critical animus?
I think it's that like in some instances, you know, I'm gonna like a Ruby Dixon. I'm gonna have a good time with a Ruby Dixon. But then at a certain point, I'm gonna be like, I'm not having a good time with these Ruby Dixons no more.
Wow.
I need to find something else. It's light and fluffy, but at a certain point, you're like, my teeth hurt. And then you find something else. So
you're saying don't go know when to stop with the slump breakers?
Yeah, I think like basically that like
you're saying seek out bad books that you don't like.
No, more like
save some of that Ruby Dixon for later. Well, buddy.
But it's like I don't think Ruby Dixon is bad, to be clear.
Yeah, no.
I think that
until you do. You don't think it's bad until you do.
Basically, like, I think light, easy romance can be really great for getting myself out of... Speaking for myself, I don't know about other people.
Yeah.
It can be really helpful for getting me out of a slump because it's, like, easy to read. Mm-hmm. It's not hard. And often, like, there's a guarantee of a happily ever after. Mm-hmm. And so that helps. The other things that can help are audiobooks. Mm-hmm. And then sharing the activity of reading with somebody else.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, talking about books, maybe going out to a coffee shop together and reading books. Watching some booktube videos.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And not in an obnoxious way. Don't be like, hey, how about books? How about books?
Sure. Just to random people, yeah.
Well, to somebody having a reading slump.
Oh,
you shouldn't like accost them with like books.
Hit them over the head with the book.
Bonk them.
Uh-huh.
I feel like I'm really diverting from the energy of the questions.
Okay, all right. You're in a good answer slump.
Good answer slump. Yeah. What's our next question, baby?
Booktubers also talk about book hangovers. When readers are so moved by a book that they find it difficult to move on. Have you ever felt this way? I
have.
Tell us about it.
So for me, the main thing that comes to mind with like the idea of a book hangover is a memoir where somebody was talking about something like really intense or profound or something outside of my experience that I kind of like want to give space and like the space in my mind where it's like, oh, I don't know that I can like think about a book about like trauma or hardship and then immediately go into a Ruby Dixon or something else. And I have to sort of slow my roll. I think a thing that helps a lot for me is to also talk to somebody about the book. The other thing that comes to mind is if I'm reading a book that has really intense world building and there's a lot going on, I might not immediately be ready to go into another book that also has really intense world building and a lot going on. You know, you kind of have to like let the other system have it be before you learn a new system.
Yeah.
What comes to mind for you?
I can see that there will be book hangovers that last enough where it's like a problem, but I guess I would counsel people to maybe just think of the book hangover as the breathing space that the book requires. Don't smother the book. Don't suffocate the little book after it's been read. It's like, please, I need some space. I need some breathing space. I need some time to percolate in your mind. And you're just gonna go and, you know, slam another book on top of it. Yeah, I think it's okay if a book needs some reading time. Yes, I understand this could become a sort of clinically recognized condition if it lasts over a certain period of time. I mean, maybe if you're in that state where it's lasting a really long time, you could,
Reread the
depending on,
book.
well, I guess it's easy. You could reread the book. If it's like a classic or something where there's like literature on it, scholarship on it,
Okay,
hey,
yeah.
you can dive into like that world and become a one book obsessive and never leave your hangover.
I actually think like that's a great example
Yeah.
where if you're recognizing what's happening is that you're being provoked by a theme or something like that. I recently read Sad Tiger by I forget her last name.
Sino?
Yeah, thank you. And I was really impacted by it and like found it very striking and very one of a kind. But it also is addressing hardships and themes that are present in other books as well. And so I can give that book some breathing space, but then I can like branch out and find things that connect to it well. And so that add depth to the themes that are in my mind from the first book. So if like Sad Tiger is making me think about things in different ways, I can now bring in another interlocutor that will help me think about the same theme in more ways. And so the book Hangover isn't a hangover, but rather the beginning of a nice little discussion. All right, what's number 7?
7. Tell us about a few books that almost always work for you. Something that might have remained a favorite throughout your life, despite any changing reading tastes. Something that always seems to hit just the right spot when you need a lift. Or perhaps some lifetime book hangover, where the text will always be at the back of your mind.
I think this is kind of an exciting question in some ways because it really gets at what feels very special about reading sometimes, where I'll read a book and I'm excited to see what I'm going to feel about that book in years to come. Do you know what I mean? So, for instance, Middlemarch, even though I've only read it once, I am excited to read it again, 5 years' time, relate to it in different ways, and rediscover it. So, at this point in my life, I don't have like a lot of things that fit it, but I did have a few examples that came to mind. I like to reread books a lot. Marcus doesn't reread as much, maybe a little bit. These are books that I've reread throughout the years. I guess I'll start with one of the earlier ones. And you'll see this is gone, and the back cover is gone, and the front cover is barely hanging on. So this is Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card, an author who is bad in a lot of ways, personally. He is of the Mormon Church, and I believe very stridently anti-gay. I do really like the Ender's Game series. I read it first when I was pretty young. This is a sequel, Speaker for the Dead, that means quite a lot to me emotionally, and like I love the story, both the sort of science fiction elements, but also what it says about how we interact with people and how we remember people. And so it's one that I've read many times throughout my life. Another one that comes to mind is a lot of the different books by Sharon Shin. So Sharon Shin is a science fiction and fantasy author, and this part is another old copy that's pretty dinged up. She's an author that my mom liked as well. I just really like the series. It's been very comforting throughout my life. An easy read. It's nice to sort of rediscover it and think about it in different ways. Another one is Lynn Flewelling. This is the Night Runner series. So this is the first one, Luck in the Shadows. This is another example of a genre fantasy series that my mom liked, where it's got a young guy who gets involved with this group, sort of like thrust into magical world. Yeah, it's a good sort of coming of age story. The other thing that I sort of talked about in terms of like breaking slumps, romance books. What's really nice about romance books is that sometimes you will find one that it really sounds like I'm giving a dig to the romance genre. But there's an abundance, right? I have Sarah MacLean's 9 Rules to Break When Romancing a Rake, which I really like and can come back to a lot. And then also The Iron Duke by Meljean Brooke, which I don't love the cover, but that's the trouble of romance books. And I'll come back to this a lot. And then another example is it's really nice to come back to books that impacted how you view a genre or a type of book overall, that like kind of made you think differently about the genre, that really stood out as one of a kind, or just, I never thought this could be that. A big one that comes to mind is the Donna French books. This is the first one, In the Woods, and I love this series. Wow, it's her debut novel. It's her debut novel. Wow. So good. It's actually really striking to think about because this was published in 2007, and the genre of psychological suspense has changed so much since then. This is like really, really good. She writes this stuff that's like so interesting and provoking, and it's like fantastic literature. And then the other one that comes to mind, and maybe you can talk about this one as well, I think an evergreen choice is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen.
In the classic genre, you're going to have like a good chance of finding those books that are going to be at the back of your mind forever, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And because a lot of them are, as we're discovering, you know, really enduring for a reason.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with classics, they can be more accessible and less stuffy than maybe you imagine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a very vibrant book.
I had already read it before we read it together, but I had read it once, and then Marcus read it to me out loud early days when we were first dating. It was his first time reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, like, you would read this again.
Oh, sure,
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
many times. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing too, is that a lot of times it's books that I want to read aloud to people that sort of stick in that way. Like, it's a good sign that it's going to stick with me throughout the various reading shifts of my life if I am also drawn to like reading portions of it out loud with somebody.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think this book and some other classics that we've read so far and really enjoyed have, you know, such sort of sharp psychological insight. It makes or breaks a lot of really classic novels. Like, a lot of them are classics because they have that unparalleled degree of psychological insight. I mean, I think like a lot of the eccentric characters in the sort of orbit of the Austen heroines are, of course, very memorable, but like, you know, just how everything is drawn and how the interactions happen between them, extremely sharp and incisive, and that's why it endures. You know, Austen can do so much with a couple sentences or with a short chapter. It's like you've been cut in half by like a samurai that you barely saw draw the blade, you know? But very economical at times, but incredibly like effective with it, right? I mean, I've only read Pride and Prejudice and Persuasion so far of hers, but like in Persuasion, in the beginning, like when she's sort of explaining to you what has happened, right?
Yeah.
She's doing it in a fairly, like, I don't know, efficient, economical, spare way, but the impact is very sharp and deeply felt, right?
Yeah.
On you as a reader, right?
Yeah.
Of what has happened and like what are the circumstances that at the beginning of the novel, right? Like that's all established like in a
First
sort of
couple
economical
pages, yeah.
way.
Did you have any other thoughts? For you don't reread things too much, but are there any types of books or things that are evergreen that you can always come back to over the years?
Well, there's certainly lifelong favorites, you know, like I haven't reread a ton of books. A book that I've probably read more than once and like comes to mind as something that would be really inviting for a reread would be The Hobbit. You know, it's a very sort of quintessential adventure, simple book in a way, but like elegant in that same way maybe that some of Austen is. Like, it's simple but very elegant. It's also a funny book. But yeah, you know, I'll reread books when I'm dead. Either good ones if I'm in heaven or bad ones if I'm in hell.
Wow.
But no, maybe I hope maybe someday I will make more of a habit of rereading favorites. I mean, I've gotten more into audiobooks in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. I can't remember.
Recently.
But a lot of audiobook favorites, I definitely am like, yeah, I would totally listen to that again. Maybe part of it's like you want to enjoy the performance again also. Comic books maybe are something I'd be more likely to come back to on a rainy day because you can get through a given graphic novel quicker than you can, you know, a whole novel. And I'm rather sentimental. I've become very sentimental as I age about like sort of my favorite comic artists. I don't know the quality of their art. And like one I would definitely reread on a rainy day is League of Extraordinary Gentlemen Volume 1. And I love Kevin O'Neill's art. I think it's so expressive. A great adventure comic. Adventures of Tintin is another top shelf like adventure comic, best in class. I especially have this sort of emotional connection to comics where the author writes and draws, maybe because, you know, it's one, I don't know, it feels intimate. You're sort of getting one person's vision. I love a lot of stuff by Frank Miller. And the immortal classic, The Dark Knight Returns, is turning 40 this year, and I've recently been reading a lot of good analyses and things people have been writing about it, and for the 40th anniversary. It speaks for itself that it was written 40 years ago, and we live in its shadow. All the Batman material of the last 40 years is indebted to it to some degree.
Which is very similar to Pride and Prejudice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
how much of a legacy this thing has
Mm-hmm.
on the genre. Like, that's incredibly compelling to experience as a reader again,
Mm-hmm.
because you can read it again with the other things that you've experienced since in mind as well. Do you know what I mean?
A tangent, but I recently read Absolute Batman, which is like sort of a reimagining of Batman. I read the first volume. It's not bad, but maybe I expected something more radically divergent as a reimagining of Batman, because like I would say it's, you know, it's still fundamentally just a riff on The Dark Knight Returns, as so many Batman things have been in the last 40 years, to, you know, to whatever degree. One of my most beloved comic series is Dragon Ball, and especially since the passing of the author Akira Toriyama, I've become, you know, very sentimental over Dragon Ball, and I love looking at his art, and wonderfully expressive, and there's like a goofiness to it also.
That's an example of something that you appreciated as like a child, but did it in different ways as an adult, but also in some ways the same ways.
Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no,
it's kind of
that's
like
true.
fun how like it stays the same, but it also changes.
Yeah.
Those were all the questions that Hannah had, but I guess I would throw out another one just as we're talking. Is I wonder, is there anything that you're happy that you've kind of left behind and that you're excited to shift more into? Like, you're glad you shifted out of that phase and you're excited to shift into this phase.
Yeah, I don't know. I sort of alluded to the Star Wars thing earlier. I wouldn't say I'm abandoning it, or that I am abandoning enthusiasm. Like, I think there's a part of me that would still enjoy reading a lot of the Star Wars books I never read, finally reading 20 to 40 new Jedi Order books, you know, and seeing what that's about. But I do have sort of positive feelings about, like, maybe leaning at this moment in my life a little bit away from the Star Wars stuff and becoming more familiar with classic, with at least some classics is, like, very exciting, you know? Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm abandoning Star Wars, but maybe giving it some time before someday coming back to it.
Yeah, I think for myself, there are certain books that when I was younger, I had a greater tolerance for types of plots that, like, I now consider in a different light. Some books where there was a romantic subplot between, like, characters with, like, a power differential or like an age gap or something like that, where a thing that I found tolerable at one time but I now view differently. True for like the romance genre, where if they're dealing with like problematic themes or like complicated dynamics, I want them to do it in a smarter, more thoughtful way. Whereas when I was younger, I wouldn't have flagged that in the same way. Perspective was different, right? And so I'm happy to think about that differently as I get older. And then I am more excited that my reading is nowadays, like, I'm more likely to engage with a greater variety of things. At the same time, I've gotten more comfortable with stopping something if I'm not enjoying it, if I'm like realizing like this doesn't quite fit. So that's like a shift for me as well.
Thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it.
All right, bye. Oh, and the next part was like to tag people. We ain't got people to tag. So if you have thoughts or if you want to share any of your answers, that would be really cool.
You, the viewer, are tagged.
The viewer, are tagged. Yeah. So talk to you later.
You're in a very select club.
Wow. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.